SJ, welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar.
Collections Manager and Registrar. Marianne Parker, Kiowa, Curatorial Assistant. Leslie Halfmoon, Caddo, Delaware, Choctaw, Exhibition Specialist in Media for Research. Elena Queton, Osage, Mvskoke, Cherokee, Exhibition Specialist. And the man with the most beautiful voice in the world, John Hamilton, Kiowa, Caddo, Cheyenne, Wichita, our researcher and musicologist. Rance Wariakwe, Comanche, Media Specialist and Researcher. Zach Rice, Pawnee, our media specialist. Alicia Harris, Assiniboine, our image researcher, and Chelsea Hare, Choctaw, our image researcher. Let's give them all a round of applause. We also had an amazing group of tribal elders, leaders, and scholars called the Knowledge Givers, who help teach us, guide us, and give us encouragement. You're going to hear from one of our knowledge givers here in a few minutes. Our visitors will be enlightened to the complexities of our societies and our rich and diverse cultural lifeways. They will see and hear stories of resilience, resistance, and perseverance. We show examples of our commitment and our sacrifice to a country that tried to erase us. But most importantly, our visitors will see us as human, people who love and care for our families and our communities. Despite our historical mistreatment, our first Americans are among the most loyal of all U.S. citizens. 1 in 100 Americans served in the armed forces. However, 1 in 9 Native Americans serve in the military, over 10% of our Native population. Since the Revolutionary War, we have fought for the rights and freedom of others when these were not afforded to us. We did not receive our citizenship until 1924, and we did not have universal voting rights until 1965. FAM pays tribute to our modern-day warriors and our servicemen and women who protect the land in which we belong. If you are a Native veteran, please stand. We'd love to recognize you at this time. Our Native veterans. Thank you for your service. Perhaps FAM's greatest accomplishment is receiving support and assistance from all 39 tribal nations in Oklahoma. It is impossible to tell a comprehensive history of every tribe in the state. Our approach is to tell the story of the common circumstances that remove the tribes from their traditional homelands throughout the contiguous United States to Indian Territory, and we come from as far away as California, Florida, New York, and even Canada. Imagine moving every country in Europe to a place the size of England. That is what happened here. Our tribal nations are as diverse and complex as the European nations are from one another. We are grateful to all 39 tribal nations for allowing FAM to share their powerful and emotional stories of trials, tribulations, and ultimate triumphs. The museum's 25-year journey from conception to grand opening was fraught with many political, financial, and logistical challenges. Several elders and supporters who started this journey with us are no longer here with us, and we honor them through the completion of this project. Just as First Americans have persevered through tremendous hardships, teetering on the brink of extinction, so too has FAM. In fact, the delays in construction ultimately benefited our efforts because the museum world has become more inclusive of the voices and perspectives of our cultures, including our First Americans. The obstacles that First Americans Museum faced has only made it stronger and its supporters more determined to realize this dream. And there's a few people that have gone on this journey with me, or actually I've been on the journey with them, and I want to recognize a few people. I mentioned Heather Ottown a few minutes ago, but Heather and her team did an incredible job of developing the scripts for our exhibition to make sure that our Native voices were heard. And I remember recruiting Heather. I had lunch with her a little over 4 years ago, and I said, Heather, I'm looking for somebody special to come and help us develop this exhibit. And I was going to ask her if she knew of anybody that could do the job. And she looked at me and she goes, I'm in. And I said, when can you start? And she said, now. The Deputy Director of First Americans Museum, Shoshana Wasserman. Shoshana is the heart and soul of this organization. She's been here for 15 years or more. She's been an incredible partner to me in the last 5 years. All of the details that you see in this museum, that was Shoshana. She's done an incredible job, and I want to thank her for all her years of sticking with us and keeping us all together. Thank you, Shoshana. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank you all for being here on this very special day. Oh, yeah.
Lisa Johnson-Billy. I'm a legislator for the Mvskoke Nation. I'm currently serving as what we call Secretary or Speaker Pro Tem of our tribal legislature.
Okay, you've served as the MC here today for what is a significant occasion here. First of all, how do you feel about the success and the final opening of this wonderful First Americans Museum?
Wow, my heart is bursting. I'm so excited because this is a joyous celebration. It's ours, and we can freely talk and speak and share stories, and it's our language, and it's coming from the heart of who we are as Indian people. So I'm very excited.
It's been a rocky road for this museum's lifetime. There were great ideas from the state, and then it kind of roller coastered for a while. But now it's over. What do you say to those who are somewhat negative about the idea?
Well, of course, I served in the Oklahoma legislature during a portion of the time, and there was a lot of negativity about it. In fact, a lot of the comments that I would hear, well, we'll tell those Indians to go fund their own museum. It's about them. And I would have to educate not just my colleagues, but people in my district, the people who elected me, when they would hear that I'm carrying legislation to help with the funding. And so they would talk to me about it at my town hall meetings in my House district, and I would have to educate people. This was an initiative of the state. This was not an initiative in the beginning from tribes. We already know who we are. It was the state of Oklahoma that probably looked at it from more of a tourism and bringing in dollars, but it was Chief Kelly Haney who had the thought, and how can we take this opportunity of who we are as Indian people and bring people here. And so there was a lot of negativity, and there may still be some now, but what I'm hearing now is how exciting of a place. Whether it's to bring people here as a part of a tourism package, but what is for me as a Native person is that it's us telling our own stories, and we're able to share that, where before it was more inclusive to us as Indian people, now we can share it with the world.
We are seeing wonderful exhibitions here. I took a little walk, and what I'm seeing is a real look into our people and culture, rather than a kind of a beads and trinket sideshow.
Absolutely. It's a real story. We are more than, and of course our tribal dresses and our beadwork or whatever that we each identify ourselves as, very important a part of who we are. But it's the stories that you will hear and you will see, that you experience when you walk through the museum, that I believe can cause relations with all people, regardless of where they come from in the world, because we all have stories of survival, of overcoming, and I believe that will connect us and bring us together, which in the end is always more fruitful than being divided.
We've seen a couple thousand people here today of all colors. It's the Hetkis, it's the Jotties, it's Lusty. And what is it that you hope that people take away with them from this experience?
I hope people will find a piece of themselves here, a piece of their own story, regardless of their ethnicity. I hope they find a little piece of determination, of overcoming, and of love, that true spirit of unity. And as they go to their own homes, that they will have that sense of, we all have commonalities, and how can we work together? How can I love my neighbors better? That's what I hope happens when people leave this place.
Final thought?
I'm sorry, what?
You have a final thought?
I just want people to come enjoy. In our language, we say, Holi Toplichi, come and celebrate. So for those who didn't come today, come and enjoy this place and have your prayers while you're walking this ground. Pray over this place. This land has been redeemed, and we are telling our stories.
Okay, thank you very much.
You are so welcome.
Well, that was our experience and some of the sounds from the grand opening of the First Americans Museum in Oklahoma City. I would highly suggest that someone check it out, go down there and have a good time, and learn a lot from what they've got put together. Now, we're going to take a short break here, and we're going to be back, hopefully, and start talking about the most recent elections here for the Mvskoke Nation. So please stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio.
Yes, Jay, we are back here with election office manager Nelson Harjo Jr., and he's going to talk with us today about the primary election and the results and all things election right now. So how are you today, Nelson?
Doing pretty good this morning.
Good. A little bit more, relaxed-ish. You got through it. We got through it, I noticed that you guys were really out there putting videos and stuff. I was kind of stalking your Facebook throughout. I think everyone was actually stalking your Facebook on election night. So, so just go ahead and talk to us about the results and kind of, just the whole process, if you want to kind of go and take us through election night and getting through there. I think we had some comments, some people were like, where's the results at? And then it kind of dropped right there. Could you maybe even explain, just kind of, I'll give a background of it. So the results came in around, what time? 10-ish on Saturday. And so people were kind of getting antsy, and so the decision was made just to put all of it all at once, right? To just report all the precincts. So can you kind of take us through what the decision and kind of what the process was there?
Okay. So I think at this point everybody was used to having like a live feed of a show that we would update as results came in. One of the things that I noticed in the past is that a little bit about the results process coming in was we would actually, in fact, have the different polling sites call in their reports before they closed up and left those facilities, so that way we had a set of results in hand, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because the good thing is that we know that they have closed their polls and that they're ready to come back and bring back the materials, the ballots, back to the election day headquarters. But the bad thing about that is we found that oftentimes that there was typos that were written down, or people transpose the numbers when they're reading them off. So a lot of times what would happen is when we go to update those numbers on the live feed, when we actually get the actual results receipts from the machines from those facilities, we would actually find out that we would have to go back and redo numbers and everything like that, which always caused controversy, because people were like, well, 1 minute you were displaying X amount for candidate X, but now you're saying there's X amount for candidate X. And so to eliminate confusion, we instructed the polling sites not to call in their results ahead of time, and we would just tally the results as they came in and put those all together at the end of the night. But I do want to put a disclaimer out there, though, that we didn't really actually post results any later than what we normally do. The total results usually come out around 9 o'clock, between 9 and 10 o'clock. But I think what people were getting antsy about is that there was a big gap between the time that we posted the absentee and early voting results plus what came in at that end of the election day. And I think that's what kind of made people wonder, is there something going on? But no, it's just we had already planned it out to happen that way.
Okay, yeah, so it was kind of like to make sure that you were accurately reporting.
Exactly.
Right. So if you have a question, Gary?
Yeah, there's been a lot of attention placed lately on the national elections. People saying it was stolen, stuff like that, in spite of 50 lawsuits that failed. Did any of that, do you think, affected what went on here and the way people look at your process, or perhaps even candidates, and anything related to the election?
I believe some of that had a part to play in people scrutinizing our process. Now, I will say this, challenge is good, to make sure that people are abiding by the process that is supposed to be there. But at the same time, what I fear is people might go down that same rabbit hole that we saw with our national elections for, president, and a few other positions there, coming out with really baseless accusations, but as far as legitimate questions, legitimate concerns about how the process is secure, what steps do you take to ensure that process is secure, I do believe that those are legitimate questions that people should be asking about any election.
And you can sort of expect those questions.
Yes.
The time it took to get all this completed, from opening the polls to the final count was, I'd say, pretty decent. It moved along well as far as I could see, or results being available. What was it you think that maybe aided in that process, the speed in which it took place?
Well, I do believe a lot of what aided the expedited process that we had in place this election was the fact that last year we had went out and purchased a new voting system. In years past, we relied on the vendor to supply all of the equipment and materials to facilitate our elections, but we engaged with a few different vendors. Me and the election board did, and we decided on going with Hart InterCivic, who actually supplies all of the election and tabulation devices for the state of Oklahoma. I do believe that Cherokee Nation utilizes the same systems, and also Osage Nations. So it's a very reputable company that we decided to do business with, and they had a support staff member on hand just to make sure that we were running the systems correctly, and it expedited the process, a lot, because instead of relying so much as human hands to tabulate the overall results, which is what got us into trouble in years past with posting wrong numbers and things of that nature. Not only did we have a receipt that printed off, but we also had a special drive that we inserted into our computer that would actually tabulate the results too. And if we needed to, we could compare the two to make sure that the story that we're telling is true.
Oh, one more question in that same vein, security. We've seen videos of ballot boxes being locked, and transported by light horse, I believe. And the security of ballot boxes nationally was one of the questions that came up. So could you explain a little bit about the steps you all took to ensure the confidentiality and the protections and the security for the ballots?
Yeah. So anytime that we are what I like to call a live ballot box that we are actually going to utilize to store ballots, we number that box, we assign locks to that box, and after that ballot box has received ballots, after those ballots have been counted and have been all accounted for, we assign a seal to that box. And Light Horse is involved with transporting those ballot boxes to wherever location that we need to take those to. And they serve as a witness of that before they drop a ballot box off at any location that it's empty. Like in the case of securing the absentee ballots at the post office, the Light Horse served as witness that the ballot boxes are empty upon arrival, and that after we go to retrieve those, whenever we go to start the signature examination process and eventually the counting, we open up the ballot box for them so that way everybody can see and that they can witness that there's ballots in there. And they actually store in their evidence room the ballots in the ballot boxes after they're sealed up, and they transport all of those, take them over there to their holding facilities. They're locked and sealed. They have the keys. The board does not have the keys to those ballot boxes. We account for those seal numbers on our seal logs. If on happen chance that we do have to have a recount or anything of those natures, all those seal numbers, the log numbers, will match up to what's on those ballot boxes.
Awesome.
The numbers of votes that we saw listed were still a fraction of actually what our listed membership for the tribe is. Have you all looked at that question, realizing that maybe only a scant percentage of people are actually choosing the leadership and the direction for our people? I mean, do you all look at that and have any ideas or thoughts there?
I will say this, and I can't speak for the board, on
yeah.
their behalf on this because we've already discussed this. We're very disappointed with the turnout. We believe that we announced it more than enough and informed people more than enough ahead of time of not only the election dates, the locations, but how to request an absentee ballot, when the deadlines were to make sure that your requests were in, when we were going to mail these ballots out. And at the end of the day, we get back what we get back that Saturday morning. So we're a little disappointed in the overall participation of this election. We are actually going to be cooperating more with the executive branch to see, how we can get more people not only to register to vote, but also to actually participate in our elections. Because if we've seen anything from the national elections, from these past 6 years, 8 years, elections do have consequences for a nation and what direction it can go into. So we think that if people are wanting to see the nation going in any certain direction, and I'm not saying which direction our nation needs to go into or anything of that nature, but if people do want a say in how this tribe operates, how this nation operates, then the loudest way that they can make their voice heard is by casting a ballot.
Right. No, that was kind of going to be my question about voter turnout and stuff. So I had kind of, this was kind of one of the lower numbers because we went back in our past coverage and we looked at the participation, and this was pretty low since I think 2013. Mm-hmm. So it was I think it was lower, but it was around the same numbers. So it kind of went up and went down, and so I don't know what it could have been. I mean, I understand that we're kind of in a weird time just in general, with a global pandemic that kind of in there, and then on top of just, I don't know, we've always talked about voter apathy, and what is going to, kind of take away that apathy and want people to want to vote, and I don't know. I don't want to get too in depth in that. I could probably talk about that for more than the time that we have. So
I like griping.
Yeah, just the light one.
It's a couple of phenomenons we've seen in over the years is that people have joined the tribe for cheaper car tags, nothing else.
Well,
and we've seen that happen and.
The ARPA money. So the ARPA money is a really good thing to look at because, in the, how many people do we have registered to vote in our nation?
We have approximately 17,933 was the last number I looked at. That could have changed since then. That was a few weeks ago.
Right, and the numbers that they're talking about for ARPA for the applications is about 39,000.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's something to look at of how many people actually voted versus how many people are asking for the tribe. So that's kind of they need to kind of start seeing the relation there, as not just a benefit of monetary benefit, but just the benefit of putting leaders in that are going to make a good decision to also come roundabout for monetary benefit, so.
The subjects you mentioned there, I think, are two of the major factors for participation. One is money. If you're going to get some money, let's go vote, yeah. Mm-hmm. And the top leadership for a tribe, like the principal chief. This election was for representatives to the council primarily, and of course, a constitutional amendment.
Right.
We're delighted to hear about. Yeah. But have you seen that? Is that a phenomenon that the board and your staff have noted? It's got to be those big, huge, major issues before people will come out and vote.
Our principal chief election before they.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think if anybody has been paying attention, even these past, from this election to this past chief election to even the 2017 election, which is when I actually, started with the office there. The numbers fluctuate between those two different groups. It's always a smaller turnout for seat B. I don't know why that is. You're electing half the council,
Right.
during the seat B election. But in a roundabout way, too, I think we mirror what happens on a national level, because there was records broken for this past presidential election, and along with that, several national, representative positions and Senate positions. But there's always a smaller turnout when it's a midterm election. So I do believe we mirror that in some sense of the way, where people are just not paying attention as much whenever it's those top positions that aren't, up for election.
Maybe we should take a few moments here and list the results of the election there. You've got...
Yeah, well, I'm looking at my page one, and my page one is cut off. So,
Okay,
so we
Nelson.
might have to have Nelson go about and see, like who
won
kinda
where.
made it. Yeah,
okay.
if you want to go ahead.
So I'll just say, I'll go over just some general numbers here. We had 905 absentee ballots cast for this election. We had 443 ballots cast during the early voting days, and we had 1,188 ballots cast during Election Day on Saturday. So the first on my list is, of course, we can't forget about Creek District. Patrick Freeman retained his seat because there was no other candidates that sought election against him, so he retains his seat. So we come up with McIntosh District, which was between Adam Jones and Galen Cloud. And Galen Cloud has, right now, is currently the unofficial winner with a vote of 1,373 ballots for him versus 1,089 for Adam Jones. So he made the 55%, over the 50% mark to win that contest. For Mvskoke District, we have in favor of Joyce Deere at 1,296 votes for her versus Sandra Parrish, which she received 1,139 votes. So that puts Representative Deere back in office unofficially at this point with receiving over 50%. For Mvskoke District, we're going into a runoff between Travis Scott and Sandra Golden. Travis Scott received 740 of the votes cast for that contest, and Sandra Golden received 608, which puts them around 30% and 24% respectively. So they will be going to a runoff in November. Okmulgee District, we have James Jennings and Nelson Harjo Sr., not me, going into a runoff in November, with James Jennings receiving 815, which is roughly 32%, a little over 32%, versus Nelson Harjo, who received 822, which is a little over 33%. So they'll be going to a runoff in November. Thomasina Hola Osborne retained her seat with 1,734 votes in favor of her versus Edwin Marshall, which received 707 votes. So she won hers. She acquired over 50% of the votes for that contest. National Council seat B, Tulsa District, will be going to a runoff between Leonard Gouge and Lucian Tiger. Mr. Gouge received 644 votes. Lucian Tiger received 819 votes. So 25% for Mr. Gouge and roughly almost 33% for Lucian Tiger. Mark Randolph retained his seat with a 1,624 votes going to him, and Deirdre Thompson received 833 votes. So Mr. Randolph received over 50% in his contest. And the National Council referendum number NCA 21-053, for those that don't know what that is, that's the Freedom of the Press Act, which passed 1,914 votes for the amendment, with 596 no against the amendment. And so that definitely passes with over 76% of the votes garnered for that election. So
almost a 3-to-1 margin.
yeah. Pretty close.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to have a show to discuss that in the future.
Right, yeah. Oh, we definitely need to discuss that. I just like hearing those numbers too.
I know. We went after them for so long.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks, while we kind of gloat here a little
Yeah.
bit. Now, seeing, the turnouts that we've got, are any of those like really tight races, do you think?
I believe this is just my my personal feelings, just looking at these
Sure,
results.
yeah.
Of course, it's any candidate's right, to contest, the results or request recounts and things of that nature. But in my own opinion, these results are pretty definitive. I do. I mean, once again, any candidate has the right to, contest these, but I do not believe that even during the course of a recount, the results would change. If they do, it would be very, very marginal, but not enough to change the results.
Now, people have thrown that word recount around a lot in the last couple of elections. It's not quite as simple as that, is it? And it is, in many places, expensive.
Yes, and it all depends on what the candidate is wanting to recount. If they are looking at a specific polling location in a specific district, I believe that would be $500. But if they're wanting to do a total recount of everything and to recanvass everything, it would be $500 per district. So it could get a little costly. And I think that's it's a good and a bad thing. It's a bad thing that it is expensive, but it's a good thing because it doesn't encourage people to do just
Frivolous.
recounts, request recounts. So that's where it's at. But once again, regardless of what my opinion might be or what we think is, if candidates so choose, they can request a recount, and but they also have to state a reason for the recount, why they believe one should take place, and all of that has to be presented in writing by 5 p.m. this Friday. If that doesn't occur, well, then these election results stand, and then we move on and prepare for the general election.
Okay, so it ain't cheap, and the deadline is here. So if anybody just has to have a recount, then you better get it done now. Then. Huh?
Yes.
Does this happen often, by the way?
I believe, which, just for full disclosure, we did have a recount request during the chief election, during the initial primary, which we had to ultimately redo the election, the primary for 2019. But outside of that, I have not seen any other request for recounts here in the recent past. I'm talking about the past, like, 3 elections. I do believe we've had some further back, back in the 2000s, where there was a recount requested. But the laws have, I don't think an actual recount has actually occurred to this point, to my knowledge, for what I've seen, because the laws prior to 2013, I believe, if the Supreme Court justices felt that the ballots were not stored or secured in a proper manner after the election, if they came to that initial decision that we cannot say that these things were safely secured after the election, well, then no recount was to take place. So you couldn't do anything past that point. You couldn't even have a recount if you wanted to, if that's what the Supreme Court saw. What happened in 2019, or after 2013, whenever there was amendment introduced to that process, it allowed the Supreme Court to come to a decision. If they could not definitively state that the ballots have been properly secured, then they could call for basically a do-over of the election, do the whole thing over again. But now, after 2019, there has been another amendment introduced to that particular piece of election code that says if the Supreme Court justices cannot reach a definitive decision on whether a recount should take place and they call for the election to be redone, it would only be for that contest that was affected by that recount. Meaning that any one of these candidates to ask for a contest, it would only affect the race that they were in. If we had to do an election over with, all the other results would stand as they were.
Right, because I remember that was a thing with the 2019 is that we had to redo the entire,
Yes,
like all the seats, not just the principal chief,
yes,
election.
Yes, it was everyone.
That was kind of the.
Yeah, so I don't believe that will happen again. If there is a contest that is, or a request for a recount that is presented to us, I do believe that we will be allowed to have the recount, and I do believe that the results will state what we have already stated. But just for full disclosure, if that was to happen and we did have to redo one of these things, it would only be for that contest. All the other results for the other contests would stand as they were.
Wow, a lot of stuff to keep track of there.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Now, it's only been a couple days essentially since the election, but have you had any feedback yet from voters or anyone?
It all depends on who you talk to. There are, opinions always vary, and everybody always has, their own thoughts and inputs. You hear the extremes of, the low voter turnout is, all our fault, but then you hear on the other side that this is one of the smoother elections that we've seen take place, especially with the, even though we've had a couple of complaints with the timing and stuff of how we released the results on that election night. So I can honestly say it's, if we did a poll, and asked how many people, thought the election went smooth, how many thought it was just, god awful, it probably could be 50-50, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe you want to put like a exit poll type thing out there of, surveying to kind of address the voter turnout, to kind of see what our citizenship is kind of saying, just kind of put it out there, like asking, why don't you vote? And maybe you might get an answer, and we can be like, oh, okay.
You might get knocked in the head.
Yeah.
Now, that raises an interesting question for me. Are there any prohibitions against an exit poll? I mean, do we have to have permission or whatever? We couldn't have a reporter talk to people as they left?
To my knowledge, as far as we're concerned, there's not anything that would prevent somebody from doing, like an exit poll. Because most of what Title 19, which is what we fall underneath, our Creek Nation Title 19, is really geared towards the integrity of the election itself, or anything that the candidates might do to show that they are qualified to run for office or seek or hold office. Outside of that, there's really not a lot that we do control, and I try to remind people that a lot of suggestions and everything that people have about maybe you guys need to do this and do that, and some of these ideas are very good, but I had to remind everybody that we can only do in accordance with the law, and if we was wanting to change something, especially with the election itself, that has to be passed through legislation to the council to allow us to do different things.
Should we take a break here?
Yeah.
Okay, please stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio. We're talking to Nelson Harjo Jr.
Yes, correct.
about the election, and we'll be back right after this. So stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio here on 1240 The Brew. Welcome back to Mvskoke Radio. We're here talking about the most recent election for the Mvskoke Nation. Joining us here from the election board is Nelson Harjo Jr. and our managing editor, Liz Gray, who's getting broken in on all this fun stuff. Now, we had talked about exit polls and things like that. Another question that we saw that created a ruckus in the national election were poll watchers. Do we actually have any? Is it allowed? Is it prohibited? What do you got there?
Yes, we are certainly, our candidates are allowed to have poll watchers. Of course, I don't think our poll watcher system is as robust as the national, because not only do you have watchers for candidates, but you also have watchers for political parties themselves on a national level. But here we don't have political parties, so the candidates are certainly allowed to have poll watchers. There's a deadline that they have to present those names to us, so that way we just know who's going to be allowed to remain inside the buildings with the workers and watch the voting process take place. I will say this is something that I did mention to the council about a year or so ago, to kind of look at that particular thing and actually make more clear the watcher's duties, because in our codes, they're pretty ambiguous on what a watcher's duties are. It's not really laid out specifically, what they should be doing, what they're looking for, or and certain other roles that they may or may not play. So I think that part in our codes does need to be addressed, so that way it's clear not only for us but for the candidates and the watchers themselves, what exactly their role is, because once again it's pretty ambiguous in our laws what they do.
Well, maybe you could explain perhaps actually what a poll watcher is and what they do. Do they stand physically inside a polling place, and do they look at ballots, or what are they doing?
And that's the thing. It all depends on what your law allows a poll watcher to do. But a poll watcher is a representative, in our case, of a candidate, that actually can see the process taking place whenever voters are showing up to check in to vote, receiving their ballot, and then casting their ballot. And they are there to really just ensure that we're not really denying anybody that does have the right to vote, the ability to vote. And they're making sure that we're following that process on a consistent basis. So that way we're not making special exceptions for people that come in and say, no, you're not allowed, but yes, you are. So they're just making sure that we're following, up. That's what a poll watcher is supposed to do. Some of that stuff, like I said, is not clearly defined in our code right now. It just kind of says the watchers are there just to watch everything happen, but what are they watching for? I mean, what are the specific things that they need to be calling out on the behalf of their candidate? And I do know that a watcher can remain inside the voting area. But I do caution that we do not allow anybody to actually interfere in the processes. So I wouldn't expect a watcher to be standing over the shoulder of a person that's filling out a ballot, because these are supposed to be cast in secret ballots. So they're not supposed to see who they vote for. And the only other major item I do know that the watchers cannot do is that even if they know or hear the poll workers call out any results or anything right at 7 or even a hair before 7, whatever the case may be, they are not to disclose any results to anybody prior to 7 p.m. So even if for some reason they know what, let's say, I don't know, Coweta, what their tabulation results say prior to 7 o'clock, they're not supposed to let anybody know. They can't do that.
All right.
The other prohibitions that we're aware of would include electioneering anywhere near or in a polling place. And so what are the restrictions there?
So electioneering, nobody can bring any election materials within 300 feet of the voting area. So, and that would include anything to do with elections. That would be like, shirts that say, elect so-and-so, or signs that might be outside, elect so-and-so, or even, if you had anything on your vehicles or things of that nature, if we happen to see that. None of that is allowed within 300 feet of that polling area. You can't, and the only other thing that it talks specifically about electioneering is that you can't have like a pamphlet from candidate in your pocket and leave it inside the voting booth or things of that nature. Those things are not allowed. And that, and this is what really, I try to explain this to people, and I'm not going to take too long, but I'll try to get this out there real quick. Now that's for election day, electioneering. That's what governs us on election day. But for other things that happen outside of election day, those laws are found in Title 37, which talks about political activity on tribal properties. And that's associated with electioneering materials, like if somebody was to walk in to one of our clinics or one of our casinos that has a vote for so-and-so shirt on, that is certainly not allowed. You can't have signs, sitting in the lawn areas of the community centers or things of that nature, or even outside in front of the clinics or stuff like that, not on tribal property, because then, you could get in trouble for that.
Now, you do see some of this stuff, I guess, on the rights of way, just outside of tribal property. Not, I guess that's illegal.
Yeah, as long as it's not on tribal property, and as long as it's not within 300 feet of that polling place on election day, it's certainly permissible. I do know that a lot of the candidates actually have to go get permits, from the different cities and stuff, if they want to put signs up on right-of-ways or on public properties and things of that nature.
Okay. Yeah, I had heard electioneering, and I guess I was kind of like, what defines that? Because, there's been people, heard people electioneering online, but I'm like, how can you electioneer online? So that's kind of like
anything online is sort of redefined.
That almost kind of like gives me the sense that like maybe you don't understand what the electioneering really is defined as, So that's a good definition of like what it actually is, because I don't think that you could virtually electioneer. I don't think so. That's possible.
Not to my knowledge. The only time I think it would apply, and this would be more specific to the employees of the nation, would be if they are in support of a certain candidate and they're using their, like their workstation computers or their work time to electioneer for a candidate.
Right.
Now they certainly can't do that.
Okay.
And there are laws that talk out specifically against those
Okay,
things.
so that's kind of gives some guidelines there.
Right, some real prohibitions. We only got a couple of minutes left here now.
I guess we talk dates.
Pardon? Yes.
Dates, general election dates.
Yeah, what's coming
Yeah.
up and what do we got there?
Okay, so I do know that October 13th, and you might have to correct me on this because I didn't bring that particular date with me, is whenever the absentee ballot request for the general election, well, that's the deadline, October 13th. But I might need correction on that. But I do believe that that's the date. I do know that the early voting will take place on November 3rd and 4th, which is a Wednesday and Thursday. And the general election will occur on November 6th, the first Saturday in November. It's always the first Saturday in November. And I'll just give a shout out to everybody that right now, voter registration is opened up. It can open back up 3 days after the election has occurred, so it is opened up. It was opened up as of yesterday, and people can, if you didn't get a chance before this primary, you can certainly register to vote for this general, and you can request a ballot. But I do believe that requesting date is October 13th, if I'm not.
I looked it up, and it is October 13th.
Okay.
So absentee, October 13th. And in-person voting registration deadline is October 26th.
Yes, correct. Correct.
Okay, and about the minute, let's call it a minute we've got left to chit-chat here. What does it take to be a voter?
We have a registration form that can be found online, or you can call our office and we can mail you a registration form, and along with that we'll send a prepaid postage envelope. So if you want to register to vote, we try to make it as convenient as possibly can. You can mail that back in, you can scan and email that back into our office email account, or you can fax it back in. And all of that information can be found on our website, or you can give us a call and we can fix you up with that.
Okay, if it sounds like we're repeating stuff that you probably already know, we still do have an election coming up where you probably need to know this. Well, any last thoughts in the last few seconds we have?
Yeah, to show up, vote,
Show up.
talk to us.
Okay, all right, that'll do it real quick. I think unless, do we have any announcements here? Come to think of it. We try and do this when we can. If you want to play in the employee softball league, it starts on October 4th. And there are currently more than 39,000 applications for the American Rescue Plan Act. So if you're having a little trouble getting through those folks, just go ahead and keep hammering away and it'll work. All right, I guess Gary 5 Joe Difkidos, Mabo Hedge to Wedgekit.
And I'm Liz Gray, Chipkados.
Okay. All right, folks. Thank you, Nelson. We appreciate you being here, and we'll probably have you back in the next election, too. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mado.